I've posted a lot of videos over the years, but I've never seen my subscribers this mad. This clip right here shows me burning hundreds, if not thousands, of board foot of good lumber. Now, burning good hardwoods sounds insane, so let me show you exactly what we've tried and why we still burn hundreds and hundreds of board foot every single week. Let's go. So the most obvious question is, why not just sell it? And this is something I've tried, and let me explain why this failed, at least for us. And so as soon as you start trying to sell something, it then becomes a product, right? Even if it's scrap, it's now becoming a product because we're trying to generate revenue from it. Now, in order to generate revenue from a product, you need to have some type of consistency. And this is how our scrap looks coming from our shop. It is not consistent at all. So if we were to sell boxes of this, one day you might get a whole bunch of cherry scrap with a couple maple pieces. The next day you might get a chunk like this, right? And so you have to pay some kind of a labor to sort it, yada, 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 so you have some type of a consistent product. And you end up with something like this. And this is assuming that I'm not going to use these for anything else in my shop that I'm making. So now we need to sell it at a high enough price in order to justify the labor that was done to it, in order to sort it, yada, yada, yada. The problem that I've always came across, whether it is this small box or a pallet of lumber or cutting all this up into tiny pen blanks, you name it, you name the product, we have tried to make it, is the most crucial aspect. And that is letting people know we have it, right? The marketing behind it, the taking of the photos, the posting of the Facebook post, the posting on Facebook Marketplace, all of those things. And I have never been able to justify the marketing costs behind it in order to pay for the box. So for example, because the numbers may differ for each species, let's say this box of maple right here, I had to actually sell for $40 to justify the labor and the marketing behind it. Well, most people would just go out and buy a piece of maple and not trust the box. And then marketing cost increases and then the price of the thing goes up. And like, that's been the real pickle behind it, is a justification for the marketing. And in order to justify the marketing, the price goes up to a point where people are not willing to pay for it. If marketing was free, I could do this. It just has never been free and will never be free. And then you run into the customer service and the scaling factor of what if you don't sell the boxes, then you have storage issues. There's all kind of other issues, whether it's a box or a pallet or pen blanks, etc. But let's just say that, and I've done this, let's just say that all of that does work. I can justify selling a box for $20 or a pallet for $120 to Joe Schmo who saw us on Facebook Marketplace. The question I always end up asking myself is, if our shop was a scrap sorting shop and we got unlimited amounts of free scrap into our shop, would it be more profitable and better off if that is all we did, right? Instead of making our other stuff, like our cutting board blanks, our panels, etc. And if the answer is no, it would be less profitable and it would grow less fast and be less scalable, then don't do that at all, right? Because if it doesn't work at 100% maximum capacity doing one thing, it's not gonna work at 10%. And so that's the question that I have to ask myself as a business owner, where my employees are trying to grow in this company. We have a lot of overhead. And so if it's not worth making these boxes full time, then it's not worth even doing them 10% of the time. And so to answer the question, that's why I don't try to sell it. So selling scrap is not simple. It's not necessarily cheap. It's not scalable. And I am better off making other things in my shop than trying to box up scrap for something that I can't do long term. Hope that makes sense. So now with all that business talk, let me turn my hat around to the biggest moral question y'all guys had, like this one and this one. Why not donate it? So let me start off by saying I would love to donate every single piece of scrap and never have to burn a single piece. But there are two major problems with that. And the first one is the amount of volume that we actually do in this shop. So these pallets right here are premium offs that we have made in the shop over the last 2 weeks, okay? Over here, This is usually full of wood. We processed over 10,000 board foot of lumber over the last 2 weeks in our shop, which is a ton of lumber. We're gonna get a new truckload in a couple days. This is gonna be filled back up. The next thing is access. And so I'm in the middle of nowhere. And so I would love to donate to the first bucket, which is schools, right? I would love to give all this wood to schools. And we do give it to a couple. The problem is, one, it's hard getting in their system. Two, they typically want some type of organization of said scrap, right? So they can build projects out of them, build some type of a curriculum. I would love to donate to more schools. It's just hard to do. Now, even if I found 3 or 4 schools, that's only eliminating 3 or 4 pallets, right? Now, the next thing is makerspaces. Let's donate to makerspaces. I do. I donate to the closest makerspace I know, which is 2 hours away, and they have a pallet of our lumber about every 3 months. So I still have a ton of lumber. The next one is, why not donate to me? Like this one, and this one, and these two, right? Just give it to me. I'll come pick it up. I'll even pay you a little bit. Here's the problem, and we've done this, and it sucks so bad that this doesn't work. So I live about 75 feet from the back of the shop, and we've put a thing like, hey, come to our scrap pile and get all the free wood you can. A couple problems with that are safety and security, because you may have people show up on Sunday night, Monday morning, you may be outside playing with your kid and somebody shows up. So then you have to put it around constraints, which then costs a little bit of money to like say, hey, get the heck out of my yard. Why are you here? Then you have people snooping around your business. And as soon as you put up free, you don't always get all of the good people, right? You get a lot of the people that only want free stuff. And then if you only have free stuff, you're known as the free guy, right? And that's not a good reputation to have as a industrial business trying to generate revenue.
Who's number 46,853?
We can't just give it away for free. Like, it's a real problem that we have tried, because I am that maker that likes to keep stuff right. I have my pallets up there. I want to keep it. I know you guys would use it a lot, but it's just really hard to give it away for free at scale. Now, the fourth bucket, and this is something I need y'all's help on, is charities. So if y'all guys do know of any charities that are looking for random wood that I could donate to, I would absolutely love it. So let me know in the comments down below if there is a charity that I could donate to instead of burning a lot of this scrap. Now, even with all of that being said, even if I were to give some to charity, donate to schools, donate to makerspaces, I'm still going to have some amount of scrap I'm going to have to burn just because of the sheer volume of all of the wood that we process. And that drives me to the third most commented question that we had, and that is, why not process it more? And for that, my friends, we need to go to my old shop. All right, we are back at the family farm where I grew up and where this whole woodshop journey started. And when you think about processing, there are 3 buckets you can put processing the scrap into. You can put it in buying equipment that can process it, using unskilled labor to process it, or using skilled labor. And so to quickly go over the equipment part, we do not have enough scrap to justify buying the equipment to make the pellets, the briquetters, the mulch, right? Believe it or not, we do not have the amount of volume needed to justify the buying of that equipment. Plus, we don't even have space. So that kills that argument. But the unskilled labor is interesting, because in this trailer right here was my big attempt at solving that problem. And so a while back, 4 years ago, I was selling a ton of piggy banks, which were made from red oak. And that was the only product we were doing. So we had all this red oak we were burning. And so I thought it was a bright idea, because people barbecue with oak, they have firewood, all that good stuff. So I hired somebody and paid them to simply cut up our scrap, put it into feed sacks, and then we'd sell it for firewood, whatever people wanted, right? And I needed to sell the bags for $10. After 4 years, there is still a trailer full of that wood, and the feed sacks have now deteriorated. Why? Just like I said earlier, we cannot get over the cost of marketing that product properly in order to sell it at a break even or even a slight profit. Therefore, you end up with a trailer full of wood. Long pieces, short pieces, did not matter. Now, we tried selling walnut, maple, cherry. People don't want to barbecue with walnut, so they want specific species, and that's a whole nother thing. But the last bucket is the skilled labor part, right? Why not get skilled labor to make cool things out of there, right? Chaotic cutting boards and chess pieces and pins and all of that good stuff. Let's go into my old shop and I'll show you exactly why that didn't work for us and what we tried. Behind me is my shop where all of this began. And the reason we're here is that I still have all of my old hobby equipment. And why my hobby equipment is important is because if we were to hire skilled labor to process our wood, they would have to work on it in here because our industrial equipment cannot handle anything that's less than usually 13 inches. Sometimes it's 12, but most likely 13 inches. So you have these big chunks of wood that we can't plane, we can't really do anything with, and you actually need hobby equipment to do it with. So let's just say we hire Phil, who is a very skilled laborer person, and we put him in here. One, there's a little bit of liability to that, and now we have to insure this other shop. But two, now we're putting a skilled labor person on equipment that isn't as efficient as the other equipment in our shop. And so why would we take our most skilled person and have them making something out of our scrap when they could be using all of their skill and all of their knowledge in our industrial shop setting, right? That's a problem. Now you say, well, maybe Phil can stay over there at the industrial shop and just do his own thing. Well, then he gets in the way of all of our other processes that's processing those thousands of board foot every single day. And the real irony of all of this, and let's just say it does work, right? That if Phil can come here and make stuff and he's really good at it and we are making a profit on it, right? And everything's happy, you pay for the insurance, etc. The problem then becomes, let's say one of his products take off. And that's assuming that I am also taking care of the marketing for this new product and all the other stuff that goes along with it, which is also really hard to do. As you know, sales is probably the hardest thing in woodworking in order to make money, right? So let's just say it does take off and everything works out great. Well, guess what? We're making, trays out of this right here, out of this scrap. Well, eventually we'll run out of scrap to make it with, and then we'll have to start making it with the boards that we are getting the scrap from. And then when we start making it out of the boards we get the scrap from, guess what? We make scrap. And so no matter what you do, whether you hire skilled labor to make stuff, the product takes off, you end up making scrap again. And so it's not a fixable thing. There will always be some sort of waste. And so skilled labor does not necessarily fix the problem. It just moves the problem and delays it a little bit, but it doesn't really solve it, even if it does work. Unskilled labor doesn't solve it because it's hard to market it because you go back to the physical product thing. And then equipment doesn't solve it unless you have a whole bunch of stuff. And we're right at that point where we don't have enough stuff to put in the equipment. Therefore, we have to burn it and trigger people. So after years of back and forth, I finally accepted that I can't save everything. And honestly, it really sucks and it really hurts. But the real question becomes, where do I draw the line, right? Like, what do I have to put in place? So let's head on back over to my industrial shop to show you all the different rules and frameworks that we now have in place in order to minimize the scrap waste as much as humanly possible. And this is something that it took me years to figure out. So to manage our scrap, we made 3 simple rules. Rule number 1 is that the usable material has to be at least 13 inches long. So an example would be this piece of walnut right here. Super long, right? Well, there's a knot there, so there's only less than 13 inches of usable material. Therefore, it goes in the scrap bin. This piece, good example, not 13 inches long. It goes in the scrap bin. The next rule is that it has to be at least a 1 inch by 1 inch prism, right? 1 inch thick or 1 inch wide to be considered scrap at all. And the third thing is we don't keep very low priced woods that aren't really good to keep, i.e. red oak, poplar, stuff like that, right? Stuff that's a pain in the butt to deal with. Those are the 3 simple rules. Now, once we developed the rules, we started filling up bins like this. Why? Because I still can't make myself burn this piece of walnut right here. And we started selling all of that stuff to the public, which spawned a whole new business called DW Hardwoods. And what that is really turning into, it's not about scrap at all. We're actually becoming like the Texas wood supplier for all of South Texas. So Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and anywhere south of that in Texas, we are becoming like the premier supplier for that. And so if you live in any of those areas, and if you're in Texas, I would love to have you as a customer. And we do have a website down in the description where you can sign up and get on an email list, because we now have a waiting list for these bins right here, a lot of other pallets, and a whole bunch of limited drops that we do because we use so much wood in our shop. We're able to get really good prices, and then really we can beat anybody in the area on any types of wood prices. And we'd love for you to sign up in that email list in the link below if you are in the Texas area, and we'd love to know about new drops. So with all of that being said, what the heck do we actually burn, right? So let's go over to the burn pit and let me show you exactly what it is. So now we're back at the burn pile that started this whole outrage. And as you can see, we're not just burning anything and everything. We're burning stuff that meets all those qualifications that we talked about. Now, is this system perfect? No. Do I occasionally go through here and find boards like this piece of cherry, or this piece of walnut that I just found, or this little piece of purple heart, and throw it to the side? Yes. But burning it is a necessary evil in this whole entire process in order to keep this whole system in check and keep it flowing. So I hope that answers some of your questions, and if it did not, and if there's still a better solution, I would love to hear it, because it still hurts me every time I have to burn this pile. So please leave that down below in the comments if I missed anything. Now, as always, I hope you left this video with more knowledge than when you started, and as always, guys, remember, if you ain't cutting it close, you ain't cutting it right.